Hello everybody and welcome to another video in our web design series. We're still going through HTML, and in this session we're going to talk about the difference between an inline HTML element and then a block HTML element. And then after that we'll talk a little bit about the difference between classes and IDs. So in here again, this is just my if you type the exclamation mark and then do the emet abbreviation, you can see this is just our simple boilerplate code that it gives us. And all I've really done is change the title. That doesn't really matter for this. So now let's add a few different text fields here. So the first one I'm going to do is with a p tag, and I'm going to say this is a block element. And then I'm going to add a span tag under that. And I'm going to say this is an inline element. So if I save that and then you look over here, you can see we get the block element and then the span element. And just looking at this, you wouldn't know that they're any different. You wouldn't actually even know that the second one isn't a span element. And part of that is because we have them here on different rows. So if I were to copy the top one a couple times and then copy the bottom one a couple times, now if I save this, you can see the block element, each one is taking a line, and then for the inline element, they're just all run right together. And if I have one more on there, it'll eventually, when I run out of room, it'll bleed on over to the next line. So basically what's happening here is every time you have a block element, it's going to take up the entire width of the available space, which in this case is the width of the entire page. And every time you have an inline element, it's only going to take up as much room as it needs to display that element. So just to demonstrate this a little bit further, I'm going to add just a border around this. So you can do that with the style attribute, and you can say border is going to be 2 pixels solid black. And that'll just give us a black border of 2 pixels around the entire element. So if I were to copy just that section, let's go ahead and add that into all of these. You know what? There's an easier way to do this. We'll copy that one. And then in here, we're just going to Alt and click on all of these and then paste that. And now if I were to save this code, you can see all of the block elements, the border goes around the entire row because, like I said, a block element is going to take as much room as it can. And then for all of the inline elements, the border only goes around the exact text that we have. And again, the reason for that is that an inline element is only going to take up as much room as it needs to. The next thing I want to look at in here is the class and the ID attribute. So if we come inside of this p tag here, I can add a class, and I can say this is equal to maybe class 1, and then also an ID, and this can be equal to maybe ID1 for now. So you'll see these attributes quite often, and the difference, of course, is that an ID is unique, absolutely unique to the element. So what I can't do is copy this and then come down to the next element and paste it. And now I have 2 elements with the same class and the same ID. This ID has to be unique. Think of it like if you're a student, you can all be in the same class. So the class can be the same, but the ID number has to be different for each individual. So same thing with the elements here. So we would have to change that to ID2. And another difference is as a student, right? You can be in more than one class. So I can have class 1, class 2, class 3. But what I can't have is ID1, ID2, and ID3. This is not going to work. You can only have one single ID for every single HTML element, but they can have multiple classes, and the classes can be the same, right? So I can have class 1 here and then class 1 here again, and maybe down here I can have class equals to, whoops, what did I just do? Down here, I can have classes equal to class 2 or class 3 or class 3 and class 2. Really, these classes can be mixed and matched and combined, and multiple elements can be in the same class, but you cannot have multiple elements with the same ID. The ID has to always be unique. And that way, when we're looking to reference individual items, we can do that quite easily, versus when we're looking to reference classes of items, we can also do that quite easily. So that's what class and ID are used for. And you can sit down and type it out just like that. You could say, okay, we have a p tag, and then in here, I want my class to be equal to text1, and then I want my ID to be equal to p text1. You can do that, but an easier way to do that is I can come down here and I can say p dot, and if I say text1, that's going to give me a p tag with a class 1. It's just a nice keyboard shortcut. Another thing I can say is p and then hashtag ID. We'll say maybe p text2. So this is going to give me an ID. So if you use the dot, it's going to give you the class name. And if you use the hashtag, it's a shortcut to give you the ID. And you can actually do both here. So if I say p dot text2, and then I say hashtag p text2, so that gives me a p tag with a class assigned to text2 and an ID assigned to p text2. Another thing you can do, this doesn't have to just be used on p tags, right? I can do this on any tag I want. So I can say span. So I can say span hashtag, and then if I say maybe span 2 or 1 or whatever, right, that's going to give me a span with my ID. And then the same thing here, if I say dot span, or rather span dot span 2, that'll give me a span element with a class assigned to span 2. And then another thing is you could come in here and type div dot and then say maybe div class 1, and that'll work, but you don't have to type div, because I told you before div is like the most common HTML element. If I just type dot, it's going to default to div. You can see even here, the Emmet abbreviation is already assuming that I'm doing a div class. So if I say div class 1 and then hit enter, it's going to make a div tag for me at class 1. And let's say I wanted multiple classes here, or multiple divs with the same class. I could say dot class, maybe, I don't know, we'll call it div class 2. And then if I just put an asterisk and say I want 4 of them and hit enter, this is going to give me 4 divs with the same class. So these are just some handy keyboard shortcuts that we have just to save you time when typing. And you can do that also with the p tag. So I can say p dot p text 3. And then if I do the asterisk and let's say I want 3 of them, well, there we go. Now I have 3 p tags with the text 3 for the class name. So these are just a couple keyboard shortcuts that you use. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you to kind of understand what the difference between an inline and then a block element is. I would encourage you to actually go through all of these, all of the different elements that we've learned, you know, the divs, the Ps, the headers, the lists, the tables, the spans, and all of them, and play around with them a little bit. Put them in your HTML file, put a border around them and see how they behave. And then also, hopefully you now can distinguish a little bit between classes of HTML elements and then the IDs. And again, just one more time, this ID has to be unique to every single HTML element within the file, and the class can be shared among them. So hopefully this is helpful for you, and we will see you in the next video.